U.S. officials cite subversive behavior and stealing trade secrets as reasons for closing the Chinese consulate in Houston. They describe the consulate as an epicenter of research theft. A person with connections to China's military is reportedly hiding out at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. President Trump says it's always possible that more Chinese missions will be shut down. Under pressure from Beijing's draconian security law, many businesses in Hong Kong were quick to self-censor. But some have found creative ways to express their demands. 3 senior infectious disease specialists resigned from the University of Hong Kong. They're from the same university as the whistleblower that recently disclosed the CCP's virus cover-up. And a 3rd provincial region in China reports new virus cases. This follows outbreaks in Beijing and Xinjiang. Now hundreds of thousands will be tested for the virus there. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Trouble is brewing at a Chinese consulate in San Francisco, where a person with connections to the country's military is reportedly hiding out. It follows the ordered closure of a Chinese consulate in Houston a day earlier. President Trump says it's always possible that more Chinese missions will be ordered to shut down.
According to an FBI assessment, the San Francisco consulate is harboring a charged individual who was found to have secret connections to the Chinese military. The individual was working as a researcher at the University of California, Davis. She's a suspect in an intellectual property theft-related case and was charged on June 26 with visa fraud. Tang Juan came to the U.S. on a J-1 visa. On her application, Tang stated that she didn't have any affiliation with the Chinese military. But an investigation proved otherwise. The FBI searched her home and found evidence that she worked at China's Air Force Military Medical University. She has since been hiding out at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. The Department of Justice says China is aware of the situation. This is one of many such cases involving Chinese military scientists coming to the U.S. under false pretenses. President Trump indicated that more Chinese missions may close if necessary.
It's always possible. You see what's going on. We thought there was a fire in the one that we did close. And everybody said there's a fire. And I guess they were burning documents or burning papers, and I wonder what that's all about.
The Trump administration ordered the Chinese consulate in Houston to shut down on Tuesday. Overnight in Houston, firefighters went to the consulate after smoke was seen. Houston police told Fox 26 that staff there were burning documents. These were likely to be sensitive files. The State Department said the closure was to protect American intellectual property and Americans' private information. Beijing said it would retaliate.
U.S. officials spoke of subversive behavior and stealing trade secrets as reasons for closing the Chinese consulate in Houston, calling the consulate an epicenter of research theft.
Addressing the closure of China's consulate in Houston, Texas, a State Department spokesperson accused China of massive illegal spying and influence operations. A State Department official told the New York Times that the Houston consulate had a history of engaging in subversive behavior and was the epicenter of research theft in the United States. He also said that China ramped up the attempted theft over the last 6 months, and their target could be the virus vaccine research. Texas is a bioscience center in the U.S. and is home to some of the best and largest medical institutions in the country. Several local companies and institutions are currently developing vaccines for the virus. Prominent medical centers in the state have been targets of infiltration by the CCP. In May, the University of Texas system was required by the administration to provide records of gifts or contracts from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The two have cooperated in some programs since 2018. The university is also required to disclose potential ties to the Chinese Communist Party and 24 Chinese universities and companies, including Huawei and the state-owned China National Petroleum. Former Chinese diplomat Chen Yonglin said that science institutions have been major targets for the CCP. Chen was the first secretary of the Chinese consulate in Sydney. He defected to Australia in 2005.
In Australia, to the major labs, research institutions of universities, even the Australian Academy of Science, the CCP has sent huge numbers of people there.
And their strategy in the U.S. may not be that different. Last year, Houston's prominent Anderson Cancer Center fired 3 scientists for allegedly helping China steal federally funded research. The 3 were said to be part of China's 1,000 Talents program, where U.S. professors and researchers were paid well to work for Chinese universities or research centers during holidays while keeping their job at the U.S. labs. Last month, multiple U.S. media referencing FBI sources reported that China's ambassador Cui Tiankai and a Chinese diplomat in New York City are personally involved in recruiting scientists for the program. Hong Kong media reported that China might close the U.S. consulate in Chengdu to retaliate. President Trump said it's always possible the U.S. will close more Chinese diplomatic outposts. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
A third provincial region in China reporting local virus cases. Now hundreds of thousands will be tested for the virus. The northeastern Chinese city Dalian in Liaoning province has reported 15 confirmed virus cases, 3 local and 12 asymptomatic. That's according to a local authorities press conference. This follows outbreaks in the capital Beijing and the northwest autonomous region Xinjiang. According to the statement, all 3 local cases had not left the city prior to getting infected and had no contact with people coming from virus hotspots. The first case was traced back to a 58-year-old man who worked at a local seafood market. He lives alone. He had developed a fever on July 16th and was tested and confirmed to have the virus on Wednesday. He is now currently at the Central Hospital being treated for the virus. Following the confirmed case, the seafood market has been shut down, as well as 18 local distribution businesses associated with it. After more cases surfaced, the subway line has also been shut down. Dalian has a population of nearly 7 million. Local authorities have announced they will test nearly 200,000 people for the virus. A local told us she thinks the situation is more serious than officials are letting on. Local authority inspectors scrubbed down the seafood market where the first case was linked to and found traces of the virus. Officials have raised concern the virus could be tied to seafood. Beijing had previously said the new outbreak there was due to imported salmon. This after large virus outbreak at the city's biggest market. But experts have said it's unlikely the virus could spread through fish. China CDC also said it was unlikely salmon could carry the virus. Xu Zhangren, a famous law professor from one of China's most prestigious universities, has declared that he will continue to fight for China's freedom. His comments come after he was released from detention. Professor Xu is known for being an open critic of the Chinese Communist Party and its leader Xi Jinping. After he was set free, Xu published an open letter saying totalitarianism is doomed to failure and freedom will eventually come to China. He also vowed to continue fighting for freedom as long as he lives. She has published multiple essays criticizing the tyranny of the CCP, as well as Xi's concentration of power and crackdown on dissidents. In May, she asked Chinese leaders to reflect on their handling of the pandemic and apologize for their mistakes. People from the university where she previously worked together raised over $14,000 to help him after he was fired. She says he plans to donate it to those in need. 2 weeks ago, she was suddenly taken away by police from his home in Beijing and charged with consorting with prostitutes. Xi's friend revealed that the police arrested him because of his open criticism of the party. The university fired Xi for so-called moral corruption immediately after he was released from detention last week. Recent events have sparked questions in China about where the country's leadership is. That's as severe flooding continued to soak south and central regions. According to Chinese media reports, the Communist Party's leader Xi Jinping took a trip to northeastern China instead of the flood-stricken areas in the south. He went there to encourage locals to develop farmers' cooperatives and to further explore ways to develop specialized cooperatives nationwide. The actions that he is promoting were a popular form of production during the country's Cultural Revolution, a major social and societal upheaval that took place around 50 years ago. It was led by Mao Zedong, the then leader of the Chinese Communist Party. But at that time, farmers' cooperatives weakened and abolished farmers' private ownership, leading to a major agricultural regression. Now we look at one form of natural disaster that seems to be plaguing China: earthquakes. For weeks, earthquakes have been striking various regions in China. On Thursday alone, 5 earthquakes hit Tibet, with the highest having a magnitude of 6.6. This is the country's third earthquake at or above a magnitude 6 this year. Another 4 quakes of around magnitude 4 were also recorded. China state-run media reported 0 casualties, though we couldn't independently verify it. The depth of all 5 of Thursday's quakes were about 6 miles or less, considered shallow and without reaching far down into the Earth's surface. Earthquakes that occur at a depth of less than 43 miles are classified as shallow focus earthquakes and can be extremely devastating in densely populated areas. After Beijing imposed the draconian national security law on Hong Kong, many businesses rushed to self-censor, removing post-it notes with messages that could be used against them. But some persisted with the protest by using a creative approach. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
In Hong Kong, these colorful blank notes are becoming a new form of resistance.
We are trying to tell Hong Kongers that this is the only thing that we yellow shops can do. If we don't persist, we will no longer be able to deliver our message to others.
Yellow shops are businesses that openly support Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. In contrast, blue shops are those that support the city's police. During the protest, yellow shops have provided space for people to hang notes expressing their support for the movement. But things took a dip after Beijing imposed a sweeping law this June. The law punishes secession and subversion, and those convicted may face life in prison. Fearing the messages could be used to prosecute them, some yellow shops rushed to remove the notes when the law took effect, while some self-censored, only tearing down notes with messages they considered the most sensitive. Still, others took a creative approach. After removing all the written notes, they put up new ones, but this time they're all blank. A customer said it's just a different way of expressing their pro-democracy demands.
If you don't allow us to protest that way, we'll find another way to protest.
A professor says the shops are trying to express their opinions without getting into legal trouble.
They put on blank nukes so that actually even if the government wants to prosecute against them, there is nothing that can be used against them.
Besides businesses, activists are also making their message clear that they refuse to back down. Prominent activist Nathan Law met with State Secretary Pompeo in London this week. Law tweeted that the two discussed the latest threats from Beijing national security law, possible Beijing interference in Hong Kong's upcoming Legislative Council elections, and Beijing's human rights abuses. He fled Hong Kong after the security law went into effect, while another prominent activist, Joshua Wong, chose to stay. Not only that, Wong also applied to run for a seat in Hong Kong's legislature.
Our voice is our vote, and we hope to let the world to know how we not choose to surrender, how we choose not to kowtow to China.
In a BBC interview, Wong said he believes he's now being followed by what appears to be Chinese agents. Juliet Song, NTD News.
3 senior infectious disease specialists and clinical professors resigned from the microbiology department of the University of Hong Kong at this critical moment to fight the CCP virus. The 3 experts all studied under Yuan Guoyong, the first scholar in the world to confirm that SARS is caused by coronavirus in 2003. One of those who resigned, clinical professor Susanna Lau, received a nearly $400,000 government grant to combat the CCP virus before she resigned. She is currently studying the infection dynamics of the CCP virus in bats and human cells, trying to explore potential therapeutics. A university spokesman confirmed the microbiology department staff changes will take place in the coming academic year and says they resigned for personal reasons. There is a total of 8 clinical professors on the team. Yan Limeng, the whistleblower that disclosed the CCP virus cover-up of the virus on Fox News recently, is also from the University of Hong Kong. A private Chinese entrepreneur suffered from a series of unfair treatment by the government. In our exclusive 3-part interview, she exposes the problems with China's government and legal systems for private firms. Part 1 takes us to the dilemma of China's private business environment.
For years, Wang Ruijin had been a successful entrepreneur in China. She founded the East Lake Company in 1998 and invested about $17 million into the construction of the East Lake Hotel in China's northwestern Qinghai province. But the hotel was quickly shut down as local authorities started street constructions around the hotel. The construction blocked the roads leading to the building, making it impossible to operate. Over the next 5 years, the hotel had been closed for 3 of them. Ms. Wang repeatedly appealed to the government, but officials refused to help her find a solution. They simply asked her to be obedient.
If the regime wants to pave a road, then all the shops must close down. Wherever it builds, there will be a big loss, but nobody cares about your loss. Although the road doesn't occupy your business, it blocks your doors, so you can't do business. They don't care for your interests at all in China.
The hotel had suffered economic losses of more than $4 million within 5 years due to the construction. Ms. Wang had previously borrowed $5 million from the province's bank. The interest alone had rolled over to more than $4 million within 6 years. The company suffered huge financial losses. Ms. Wang made several requests to the bank, hoping it would reconsider the loan repayment. The bank refused her, saying the road construction had nothing to do with the bank. Later, the bank filed a lawsuit against her. The court ruled in 2007 that Ms. Wang pay the bank interest and a penalty of nearly $3 million.
It's perfectly normal for the bank to sue if you don't pay the interest. However, this is a hotel that was closed because of the regime. The bank should be considerate about the interest and especially the penalty interest. The interest rates are too high for private businesses in China.
The court said the bank isn't responsible, the local authorities are. But when Ms. Wang asked to sue the regime, the court said no, since it's state-owned. Ms. Wang said eventually all the losses are on private enterprises. To minimize additional interest, Ms. Wang proposed to forfeit properties or spread payments over time to repay her debt. But the bank only accepts one-time cash payment, something impossible for Ms. Wang. She said it is a common practice in China that judicial and financial sectors demand bribery. If they don't get it, they'll make things more difficult.
I think we've been wronged. We're a hard-working enterprise. Why should we offer a bribe? I'm the victim. Not only do I have to bear all the losses myself, but I also have to offer a huge amount of money as a bribe. I think it's unfair and I won't do it.
As of 2015, the dispute had dragged on for over 10 years. During that time, it generated a combined principal and interest of approximately $17 million, almost 4 times the original loan. Yet, the bank continues to refuse Ms. Wang's proposals. That's as she's still unable to pay off the debt while the interest continues to roll over. She said her experiences is no different than small merchants in Beijing's wet market, Qinfadi. In June, the CCP virus pandemic broke out in the market, leading to an abrupt shutdown. Many merchants had to watch in vain as their goods slowly rotted and ended up being thrown away.
It's a large market. All the merchants work very hard. I saw on video that the owners threw away their fish and vegetables. They may have opened their businesses with their life savings. The regime does whatever it wants. No one cares or compensates you for your losses.
As of now, the market has remained closed for more than a month. Reporting by Li Xiaohua, NTD News.
Morgan Stanley is blocking its Chinese interns from accessing its virtual network. Foreign companies have been increasingly concerned over China's tough cybersecurity rules. Experts say because of the complex cyber rules in China, firms don't want to risk having interns break the rules in an unsupervised environment, such as when they work from home. The interns were supposed to do virtual programs, but the bank says it will provide in-person training for its Chinese interns instead. Another large U.S. bank says its systems in China were exposed to frequent cyber attacks. The cyber attacks in China were infinitely greater than in many other countries. Now we zoom in on a new U.S. strategy for managing competition. U.S. senators have introduced an act to advance a new strategy for U.S. competition with China. It contains provisions designed to keep China from distorting global markets and hurting U.S. businesses. It's also aimed at confronting tech competition, safeguarding U.S. institutions, and strengthening America's position in the Indo-Pacific to protect its allies. Likewise, it says the U.S. will try to prioritize cooperation over conflict whenever possible. This would include areas like arms control, North Korea, and the environment. That's on the condition that the Chinese Communist Party demonstrates good faith and transparency. Now we turn to the world economy. Experts describe the current U.S.-China financial strife as more challenging than the Cold War economic rivalry against the Soviet Union. One reason is the size of China's economy. The Soviet Union's economy at the time was about 40% the size of the U.S. economy. Meanwhile, China's economy today is 2/3 the size of the U.S. economy. Secondly, unlike the Soviet Union, the American economy is deeply connected to that of China. One expert says the United States' relationship with Communist China can't simply carry on as business as usual. Next, we turn to China's notorious Confucius institutes and how the world's view on them is starting to change. German universities are starting to distance themselves from Chinese Confucius institutes. That's because they fear influence and espionage from the Chinese Communist Party. The University of Hamburg says it wants to oust its Confucius Institute by the end of the year, cutting its 5-year contract short 2 years early. The universities of Bonn and Dusseldorf are also seeking to end their partnerships with the institutes and say they'll do so as soon as their contracts end. And now an update on the China-Australian relations. Chinese warships have recently confronted the Australian Navy in the South China Sea. The Australian vessels were sailing nearby the Spratly Islands, which are claimed by Beijing as well as the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. But the Australian ships reportedly didn't go within 12 nautical miles of the disputed shores. Australia, Japan, and the U.S. were conducting a joint military drill in the Pacific Ocean when the Chinese warships confronted one of Australia's ships. U.S.-China relations are deteriorating. NTD Business' Paul Graney talked to Daniel Lacaille, chief economist at Stresses Hestian Company, about China.
Daniel, great to see you again. We see over the last few days, and not just the last few days, at least from a political perspective, relations between the U.S. and China deteriorating very, very rapidly. We see the consulate issue, we see threats of banning TikTok here in the United States. One area that I've noticed that President Trump has tried to give China the benefit of the doubt is the Phase 1 trade deal that he signed earlier this year. Now, I don't know, what are your thoughts? Will China, President Trump has always said he believes China will be able to honor this. I've always had my doubts whether they intended to, but looking at the data and analyzing it yourself, what are the chances of them actually honoring this deal?
I think it's going to be very difficult. There's a couple of things that we need to take into account. The first one is that in the process of this crisis, in this period, the Chinese economy has not opened. It has actually closed further. Capital controls remain. The idea that there was going to be a significant change in terms of intellectual property has not happened yet. There are also conflicting messages, because if you think about it, on one side we hear from the officials in China that the economy is back above the levels at which it was before the COVID-19 crisis, that the economy is growing in a strong way, yet the data in terms of imports from the United States, in terms of all of the things that were supposed to be implemented by now from the trade deal are actually not happening. It is true that GDP in itself doesn't tell us a lot, because if we look more granularly at the data from China, what we see is that the recovery is slower and more challenging than what the headline figures show. Consumption, in terms of also gross capital formation, etc. But it is true that even if we think about a recovery, it is going to be extremely difficult for China to honor the Trade 1 deal, the first phase, because the reality also is that it's going to be very, very difficult for the country to increase massively the imports of commodities, of soya, of natural gas in an environment in which the output gap will remain high. And at the same time, most of the growth that we are seeing so far this year comes from a very large increase in debt.
And what does it mean to China as, one of the top two, some could argue, superpowers in the world? If this decoupling, particularly economic decoupling, continues, how will things work for them?
It is going to be difficult to, on one side, present an environment of high growth, full recovery, everything is fine, and at the same time be unable to comply with the phase one trade deal. It makes it very difficult for a second phase to arrive. It makes it very, very challenging for the relations between the United States and China to improve. And also, at the same time, we are not seeing the improvements and the opening of the economy that we all expected would happen in these first months. It is true that we are all suffering from the COVID-19 crisis, but there's almost an impossible dichotomy here between the official message that the Chinese economy is going to be the only one that is completely unaffected by the COVID-19 crisis, and at the same time show in the figures that imports and that the improvements in intellectual property and improvements in financial market and capital controls are not happening.
Daniel, I appreciate your insight. We'll catch you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With the number of virus cases on the rise in Texas, Houston Airport has put new measures in place in order to try to slow the spread.
George Bush International Airport in Houston, Texas, has put new measures in place. They range from touch-free bag tag printing to biometric boarding. It allows passengers to travel from curb to aircraft while touching as few surfaces as possible.
As soon as you arrive at the airport, you're going to see signage on the curb, you're going to see signage on our digital monitors, on our PA system, audio messages, reminding our travelers of good hygiene practices during their stay at the airport.
The airport information officer added that they're trying to adapt every step of an air travel journey. Passengers are encouraged to check in and print baggage tags using their smartphones. Check-in desk agents sit behind plastic screens with stickers, reminding passengers to stay 6 feet apart. The airport has also set up tables at the entrance of every terminal where they hand out face masks free of charge.
We believe that the mask is probably the one thing that we can do to help not spread the COVID-19 virus.
Texas became a hotspot for the virus. Total deaths have risen to over 4,500, and the number of confirmed cases stands at over 360,000.
Major airlines are calling on the U.S. and the European Union to create a joint virus testing program for transatlantic flights. The heads of United, Lufthansa, American Airlines, and International Airlines Group, parent of British Airways, say the move could help protect health, build confidence, and restore travel between the U.S. and Europe. Most Europeans are currently banned from travel to the U.S. and vice versa. International capacity is down 70% from January, according to global travel data provided OAG. The impacts and anxiety of staying at home can be huge. Now we hear from a health and wellness expert and a psychologist who says there are ways to manage.
Health and wellness expert Robin Eukilis and clinical psychologist Dr. Kevin Gilliland say moderation in eating, managing stressful thoughts, and maintaining relationships are some of the practices that can alleviate anxiety during the pandemic. Eukilis turned to food, especially cookies, for comfort in the pandemic. For those concerned with weight gain, Eukilis suggests a balanced diet filled with nutrient-dense foods, such as leafy greens, protein, and healthy fats.
I can't even put the cookies down right now. So I'm not about to be giving advice that I'm not following myself. But what I can tell you is, like most things in life, can you focus on the good? Can you focus on what you're eating most of the time?
Dr. Kevin Gilliland, a clinical psychologist and mental health expert, also shared tips on how to stay sane while working from home. He emphasized activities like calling friends and taking walks. He also stressed the importance of keeping at-home spaces distinct and separate for different kind of activities.
Your whole house shouldn't be a school or work. Anchor it to a particular place. That way other people know, hey, when mom or dad are over there, they're working. Or young adult, they're working at school or they're in class. And those things help us avoid a lot of misunderstandings.
As New York City moved into phase 4 of reopening on Monday, including the opening of botanical gardens and zoos, Gilliland welcomed the emergence from the long, lonely drag of self-quarantining. He says one of the worst psychological symptoms is isolation, but adds that connecting people while still being mindful of the virus is essential.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you next time.